Hello. Today I'm going to show you how to winterize your scooter or otherwise prepare it for long-term storage. This is a pretty easy job you can do with stuff you find at any auto parts store. The first thing that we're going to do here is stabilize the fuel. Now this is a very important step for long-term storage, and usually you do this right at the gas station with fresh fuel. Measure out the amount of stable that you need. For a scooter it's usually about half an ounce. That'll treat a little more than a gallon of gas. Go ahead and put the stable into the tank, and then take the gas nozzle and fill the tank up the rest of the way. That'll swish the gas around in there and make sure that the stable gets mixed in well. Be sure to fill the tank all the way to the top, too. Then the next thing you want to do is fire up your scooter and take it out for a little bit of a ride. Run it around for 10 or 15 minutes just to make sure that the fuel works all the way through the fuel system. This will prevent anything from gumming up over the winter. Let it cool off, and then we're going to take out the seat by removing these two bolts in the back, these two fasteners in the middle, the two bolts in the front, and one large screw there. Using a 10mm socket and just a socket driver, just go ahead and unscrew all those fasteners I just showed you. And once you're done with that, get the screw in the front, and then you can simply lift the seat out. Next, we're going to take the battery cover off. There's two screws that hold this in. Little Phillips screws here. You can simply unscrew both of those. I'll just show one. And then it's usually easier to snap the front body panel out. There's just little plastic tabs that hold this in place, so be very careful when you do this. But just snap those out of place. And once that body panel is loose, you should sort of be able to wiggle it and lift it out from behind the battery cover. The battery cover will then just snap off, sort of flies off here, but you get the idea. Go ahead and unscrew the battery cables using a Phillips screwdriver. And once that's done, you should be able to simply lift the cables out of the way. There's also a rubber belt that goes over the battery that holds it in place. Just snapped around hooks on either side. So lift that out of the way. And then move the wires aside here, and you should be able to simply lift the battery out. Be careful when you do so. There's a couple nuts on the other side of those bolts that are just sort of floating in there. They're only attached when the bolt's in place. It's probably a good idea to screw those back as shown here for storage, just so you don't lose them. Then I'm going to hook the battery up to a float charger to maintain it over the winter. This is pretty simple. You just connect the leads onto the battery terminals here, as shown there, and then you plug the float charger in. It'll turn on and off over the course of the winter to keep the battery topped off. Next, we're going to drain the carburetor. There's this black drain tube on the left side of the scooter. Go ahead and position a container underneath that. And then alongside the carburetor here, I'll highlight it for you in a second here, you can see that there's a drain screw that releases a drain on the float bowl. So go ahead and stick a flathead screwdriver into that screw, and as you loosen it, you should notice a bit of fuel drain out into the container on the other side. Don't forget then to tighten that screw back up. The next thing we're going to do is take the spark plug out. Now the plug wire is shown here, and this is what we're going to remove. We'll take the plug out and then fog the engine with a fogging oil. It's a little easier to get in here if you take this electrical thing out of the way first using an 8mm socket. You can simply unscrew that one bolt there and go ahead and take and feed it back behind the bar here. Should be able to get it up and out of the way, making it easier to get to the plug wire. At this point you can simply reach in, grab hold of the plug wire, and sort of work it back and forth until it comes loose. You can see the rubber boot there that fits around the plug. There's the spark plug sitting in there. You can just barely see the end of it in the side of the cylinder. Then I take a 5/8 socket with an extender on it, fit it in there over the plug, go ahead and attach the ratchet to the end of that, and I'm able to loosen the plug this way. As I get near the end, then I'll disconnect the ratchet just because I've got a limited amount of space to work with here and kind of go the rest of the way by hand. Then I can lift that out with the plug there still in the socket. This is not a bad time to gap and replace the plug if you want to do that as well. Next, we're going to fog the engine. So here I'm just going to hook up the little spray tube to the fogging oil. Now, I found I couldn't quite get the spray tube in there because the plug's in so deep, so I used this silicone tubing to get into the spark plug hole. Shoot a few blasts of the fogging oil into there. And then once that's done, take a 14mm socket, stick it through the fan cover here, and turn the engine over by hand. This will work the fogging oil around in the cylinder. I take and put the spark plug back into the socket, and then I tighten it by hand. Be sure to do this by hand at first so that you don't cross-thread the plug and ruin the cylinder. Then I take a torque wrench and set the plug to 10 foot-pounds. Now that that's done, the last thing I'm going to do is take some other stabilized gas that I have here and just top off the tank. This will replace the gas I used while I was driving around earlier. The reason for doing this is to get the gas all the way up to the bottom of the filler neck here. This will prevent moisture from getting in the tank and the tank from rusting over the course of the winter. You can snap the body panel back in and you can put the seat back in, but you're probably best leaving the battery cover off since we're going to have to put the battery back in the spring anyway. With that setup done, the only thing you should have to do in the spring is put the battery back in, put the cover back on, and the scooter should be ready to go. We'll see you in the spring.